Well, hello, and welcome back to the studio for another episode in our very, very packed e-commerce world review. So, whether you are halfway through a 15 webinar week or just dipping in, it doesn't matter. Welcome all the same. So, we are covering a number of topics this week. But for today, we just wanted to have a quick look at the incredible changes that are happening in the world of delivery. So delivery, supply chain, operations, logistics, reverse logistics, we're having so much going on. And now more than ever, we're recognizing how fundamental the role of logistics and delivery are to the whole e-commerce experience. So it's my great pleasure to have in the studio with me today, sadly not actually with, but rather at a remote, a couple of lovely guests, Hendrik from Asendia, Liz, who edits e-delivery, and Nicole from Stuart. We'll introduce them in a second, but first off, a few housekeeping points. So, you're all familiar with webinars by now, but you know the rules. If you want to ask a question, ask away. I will try and incorporate your questions into the flow. So do just type away. But if you're shy, we recognise that. Or you'd like to give some feedback, ask us to do more things for later, just drop us an email, research@retailx.net, and that'll get through to the team, and we'll try and incorporate that into the updates. Speaking of which, you're probably thinking, this is so much fun, it's wrong to keep it to myself or just enjoy it once, but fear not. Once this is over, we'll drop you a link where you can access a recording of today's session along with the deck and any materials we reference in it, just to make follow-up and sharing a bit easier. So that's I think that's all of the preliminaries. We'll be about half an hour together, and as I said, we're open to questions in the meantime. But most importantly, it's time to meet our lovely guests, Liz, Nicole, Hendrik. Welcome, welcome. Why don't we just kick off, Liz, you're top in my list at the moment. So tell us who you are and a bit about e-delivery.
So I'm Liz Morrell, and I edit the e-delivery section of internet retailing. So that covers logistics, supply chain, obviously delivery, and work on that. Also work on the reports for internet retailing as well.
Wonderful. Liz, it's a great pleasure to see you in as close to real life as we have for a long time.
I know.
Nicole, welcome. Tell us who you are and a bit about Stuart Delivery as well, please.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Ian. I'm Nicole Mazza, and I look after the commercial team at Stuart in the UK. Stuart is a last-mile delivery provider, mainly focusing on on-demand, same-day deliveries and next-day precise delivery windows.
Beautifully put. Welcome, Nicole. Hendrik, lovely to see you in the studio. Tell us a bit about you and your role, as well as Asendia, please.
Yes. Hello, everybody. My name is Hendrik Kummeling. I'm the Managing Director of Asendia Global Accounts and Solutions. That basically means that I look after, and my team, we look after the large marketplaces and larger brands which operate globally. And we also are the knowledge base, let's say, for the Asendia local subsidiaries to build these and design bespoke solutions for large retailers.
Great. Well, look, welcome. Before we dive into our 6 things that we want to draw out from the incredible level of activity, let me just ask, is there something, if you had to reflect on the last 18 months, what is it that stands out for you as, if you like, the summary of the many lockdowns and changes? I mean, the logistics industry, delivery, has been at the forefront of coping with COVID, of the start to build back. Is there one thing that when you're at breakfast or dinner and someone says, what do you do? What is that job? I don't understand. If you pointed one thing out that you think has been emblematic of the last year, what would it be? Liz, I'm going to come to you first. What's the thing you've written about everything and everyone over the last 18 months? What stands out for you?
I think it's probably the partnership aspect, the amount of new partnerships that we've seen, retailers partnering with different providers to sort of ensure that those goods do get to people, and probably the sort of tolerance of customers as well. So we had tolerance at the beginning when they understood there'd be delays and so on. I think that's faded away now, but it's the work that retailers have done to make sure that we get those goods when we want them.
Great, by hook or by crook. Nicole, what stands out for you?
I think personally I've seen a lot the notion of flexibility, and that coming through and transpiring, in not just in people's personal lives and having to adapt to what this change brought about, but also how did retailers have to adapt their supply chain, their networks, in order to accommodate all these changes. And I've seen nothing but incredible flexibility from everyone, especially retailers, and being able to adapt with their carriers and their networks to accommodate all this.
Great. So we've got accommodating customers, adaptable retailers. Hendrik, anything different stand out to you for the year?
Well, I think to Nicole's point, I think it's great to have a plan, but nobody saw COVID coming. And for us, it meant that you need to be incredible agile to kind of change of plans. So e-commerce packages surged because consumers basically couldn't buy in shops anymore. But at the same time, the complete air freight capacity dropped because there were no passengers anymore. So that bottleneck was, I think, very challenging for us, but for everybody. But it also can set you apart. I think at that point you can show indeed the agility and the determination to still make it happen for your customers. So I would say that's one of the most marking points, I think, for me.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, look, we've been through, thank you for that, Hendrik. So I think in a way you've set us up well, because we've been through not only what Liz has been writing about all year, but our reports as well. So everything from the e-commerce delivery benchmark report that came out in March, our leap from lockdown that we did back in the good old days of 2020 when we thought we'd leap and that would be it. We didn't think we'd have to keep leaping for multiple lockdowns. We've also looked at the activities of the top 500 retailers and what they've been up to. And of course, running through virtually everything now is the underlying topic of sustainability. And this is both environmental sustainability, supply chain, as well as economic sustainability. So we've looked across all of those, and I've pulled out 6 things that you may agree or disagree that I think are interesting. So the first one is the changes at the point of service for delivery. So everything around curbside. We thought a year ago that lockers were innovative, but we've seen some real innovation since then. It's worth having a little dive into sustainability because this is now such a core theme. It's written through everything. I wanted to have a quick look at data and integration because I think we've gone from waving our hands and saying data everywhere to a more structured approach. Liz mentioned partnerships, so I think a quick look at some of the new partnerships. The evolution of returns no longer being about unwanted items, but rather a more sophisticated part of the 360-degree delivery experience. And then storehouse, which is a cross between warehouse, storeroom, store, the changing role of the store within the overall experience. So those were the things I've picked out. So we can debate those and tell me whether they are right or not as we go through. So let's look first off at Curbside. What's been interesting, before we talk too much about the changes in the service proposition, is the emphasis upon sustainability in the last mile. Now I know, Nicole, this is an area that you look at very carefully. So what increase or change in pressure are you seeing to lower those last mile emissions?
Yes, I think we've seen everybody talk about this in multiple shapes and forms, but the underlining point is always about trying to get closer to the end customer. Because if you get closer to the end customer from an inventory standpoint, that is when we can really shorten that distance that any given parcel needs to go through to ultimately get to its final delivery point. So we've seen it taking multiple shapes and forms, but ultimately it's about, how can last mile delivery providers help support on this front, and how do retailers adapt, for instance, with live inventory management, where they can hybridize their stores and allow for a dispatch from store or a collection from store, because if we think about it today, if I'm placing my order and actually the item that I'm placing the order for is 2 miles away from my house, it actually has to go all the way through the distribution network and go through 3 different hubs and depots before it gets handed over to a carrier that will then do that final mile in combination with hundreds of other parcels. But why do that if someone can pick that up just 2 miles away and do that ultra last mile, that final mile closer to myself? So this is what we're seeing happening more and more. And there's obviously also benefits from a retailer standpoint to do this, because it puts less strain on their main supply chain. Because if they can really utilize those stores as micro fulfillment centers, then that really helps them not have all the traffic of parcels go through their main DC.
But it does put a lot of new pressure on store staff. So, let's say a year ago, you turn up to work at the supermarket or the store, you'd put your smiling face on and the day would be totally normal. Whereas now you've got customers wanting to pick up orders. People wanting to know if you're going to exercise, can you order this for me online for delivery to my workspace in 2 days? And then you've got couriers coming in and out saying, I'm picking up a parcel for Hendrik, or I've got to pick this up from Liz and take it to the drop-off store that's 300 meters from her house. I mean, the whole complexity of the arrangement puts quite a lot of pressure on staff. And I've just taken this from the Accenture report. The link is underneath the graphic. And so I think what you're saying here, Nicole, is we have this direct delivery model that we're used to, fueled from central distribution, but now in the attractive, more vibrant fuchsia colour, we have this blended approach, which is small warehouses, local stores, etc., etc. I mean, this looks like an incredibly demanding setup to move to from this one-to-one, one-direction way. I mean, Hendrik, you look at this across all of Europe. Is this easy? Are we making a fuss, or is this just click your fingers and it's done?
I think it's incredibly difficult, and one of the main challenges is actually the inventory. So people need to know where to put inventory, and inventory also has its cost. So although it's really appealing to have goods closer to consumers, and I think that's the future, right? So I'm not disputing that, but I think it needs good data science to basically predict which products you need to have where to make sure that actually consumer have access to it close by. So I think this is really important. So how do you make sure that you manage your inventory management well? That's step one. And then step two, how do you predict based on historic data where you need to put your inventory to kind of balance off between getting the goods closer to consumers and on the other hand, avoid that you've got too much inventory, which obviously increase your operating costs.
And of course, not all inventory is the same. I mean, some of it needs to be kept in the cold chain. Some of it needs, well, it's got a sell by date. Some of it has special handling requirements. And so, you know, if you move from a highly optimized, well-controlled, you know, pick, pack, dispatch center, then again, you could actually, ironically, reduce the service level and predictability that you offer the end customer because, you know, staff might be busy in store and can't go and pick. So this is one where, you know, the need for real-time accurate data across the whole estate is becoming very pressing, I think. And, you know, we're talking about the dispatch part, but there are so many other aspects here. I mean, Liz, you've been writing as well about the receiving end here, a story about Asda and their delivery boxes. So not only do we have micro distribution, but we now have mini lockers in our home areas. Tell us a bit more about this, the trials of more than just your letterbox to receive goods.
This is really interesting because the idea of sort of lockers in home, I know it's been talked about for years and years and years, but we haven't necessarily seen much movement on that. The Asda trial, I think, is very interesting. The goods get delivered there. I think it's a 4-hour limit to how long kind of goods can be left there. And just any element that the retailers are doing to assure that delivery to the customer, assure the first time delivery, is really interesting. And Ian's obviously put the other stories up here about speedy delivery as well, and it just feels like I'm writing a story every single week now of a supermarket making a slightly different claim on their speedy delivery options. So Asda, I think it was last week, saying they were the first supermarket to offer their full online range for express delivery. It's really interesting the effort that's being put into to speed up that delivery to the customer.
And do we think this is something the customer really wants? I mean, I was walking just to this tube station the other day, and there's a company called Gorillas that says they can get me my grocery in 10 minutes. So if I'd ordered it at their kiosk, the grocery would get home before I would. And, you know, I'm too old to start racing and trying to outspin delivery people. But, you know, 10 minutes for a grocery delivery that you made just there and then is quite exceptional. Do we have a feeling for, is this the customer that is stamping their foot and demanding speed, or is it the retailers trying to, you know, make a competitive advantage from this? Do we have any thoughts? Customer push or customer pull, sorry, or retailer push? What do we think?
I feel possibly that it's retailers fighting to have that competitive advantage. I think retailers have got to be a little bit careful. You know, the delivery box, I think it's a great idea. Express delivery is a great idea. But I think you have to balance that with, what the customer actually wants. I mean, Ian, you laughed at me with the pickup of goods 300 meters from my house, but actually that's true. If I've got to do a return and I've got to drop it off, even though the shop is half a mile away, it sits in my car for ages. If somebody can come and pick it up from my door, I'm like, yeah, okay. But that's just me being a little bit lazy.
Or optimizing your whole
optimizing my time.
But I mean, you're not you're not out of the ordinary in that, when you ask customers, do you want more choice? 66% of them say yes, and 91% are saying that they would prioritize a retailer with fast delivery. So I think there's definitely a strong marketing incentive here. And then on the loyalty front, 96% are saying that they would shop more with retailers that have a positive delivery experience. So I suppose the surprising thing is only 45% of people would walk away after a bad delivery experience. There does seem to be a disconnect there. So it does seem as if the customers wanted. Nicole, from your perspective, is this something that retailers are saying to you, we want speed, we want micro deliveries, this is where we're putting our effort?
So I think one common denominator across the board is convenience rather than just speed. And it's more about understanding, can I get my delivery when I would like to get it because, I want to be home, or I'm not in a meeting at that time and I'm going to have my buzzer going off every 5 minutes because the delivery is coming in. So it's more about that convenience element of I get to choose a slot that really makes sense for me, rather than just speed. And that's where the notion of these 10-minute, 15-minute delivery companies, we need to be careful and consider the cost implications and what are the unit economics of doing a 10-minute delivery versus a 40-minute. And that's where, we think that sustainability in the long term is key. And how much of this demand is really just created by, VC money that's being thrown at people with coupon codes versus, Nikki actually wanting and needing a 10-minute delivery versus 30, 40, or 1 hour slots.
I think it's that want and need that's really interesting, isn't it? Do I want free delivery? Yes. Do I need free delivery? Yes. Do I want 10-minute delivery? Yeah, okay. If I can get
for free, why not?
If I get my dairy milk in 10 minutes, great.
Absolutely.
But do I need it? No, I could just go up there.
Exactly.
Be a little more patient.
One of the biggest annoyances is missed deliveries getting carded, and so the fact we've all been enforcedly at home has removed that because we're just glad to be interrupted and have a parcel. So that's great. You did mention VC. Nicole, and I should say at this point that if there are members of the VC or private equity community looking for ways to offload bags of cash, then just drop me a note, ian@retailx.net, and we're always willing to help people spend very large chunks of money. So I feel it was incumbent on me to offer that. Nicole, you set up a link there to sustainability, and I mentioned earlier that this really does run through everything, and we have some big bold claims, but we also have a quiet making it easy to be sustainable. We're seeing, for example, with Ocado, how they offer green slots, again using data to say, look, I'm going to be in your area anyway, help me fill up the van, and this would be a nice thing to do. And even the mighty Amazon that has, spent ages teaching us to just do one click and get it, is now suggesting that maybe we'd like to help the planet and consolidate our deliveries in one. Now, again, a phenomenal amount of data going on here because not all deliveries can be consolidated because they're coming from different places. But I think this is quite an interesting, quietly released development, which the skeptic in me thinks is a prelude to splitting Amazon Prime into two levels, a top tier where you can just click and get, and a second tier where you have Prime Day free. Who knows? Jeff, if you're listening in and aren't too busy preparing for space, just drop me a note. Maybe you can tell me the thinking behind this. But again, Hendrik, when you look across your network, are you seeing moves for increased consolidation in the name of sustainable and less environmentally damaging delivery? Or is this something that just people are doing in their own domain?
Yeah, I think we actually have a couple of very concrete initiatives currently with large retailers. These are mainly from China, Asia side, where we actually see that shipments are being consolidated at origin and then shipped as a single shipment, a single big shipment instead of multiple small shipments. And if you then talk about packages of 200 grams, you can actually fit quite a lot of small packages in a bigger box. And that bigger box is then delivered to a click and collect point. And actually, then you only pay the network cost once. Some are kilo related, like air freight, so there the difference is not that much, but some are also costs are parcel related, and obviously then you've got one cost instead of 100 individual costs. And I think it's a combination of efficiency, as you write here, and sustainability. So on the one hand, we are able to bring down the logistics cost, right, the carrier cost, and on the other hand, it is a more efficient way of delivering parcels. So I think it can actually be both.
Great.
And just leading on from what Hendrik touched on, which is really interesting, I think, that consolidation piece is really interesting when thinking about sustainability. But the other point that we as last mile delivery providers get pushed on is the notion of a green transport type. And that becomes really difficult because that requires heavy amounts of investment in the space to be able to have a fleet that is, 100% green. And are retailers really ready to pay what it takes to transition to green? That's a different story. So I think there's the notion of what else can we do already to move and become more sustainable without having to reinvent, reimagine, and reinvest an entire fleet and network of couriers to being 100% green. And then what can we do in terms of investment for vehicles? So those are two, I think, completely different positions and challenges.
But isn't this a bit unfair? And, I don't want to cry false tears here, but one of the challenges that delivery companies have is everyone likes to criticize even when they make small steps. So we've seen Amazon committing to buy 100,000 electric vehicles. They've bought a US electric truck maker because they see that investment. But if we've seen a number of trials in a city where, for example, Edinburgh is now electric vehicle for one carrier. And then people will say, well, that's rubbish. It's just one city. But in fact, we should be saying, thank you for doing one city and we'll build it out slowly because it's expensive, etc. So do you think that the couriers, that the logistics companies are nervous of making 3 good steps because they'll be criticised for not having made 10 perfect steps? What does it feel like from your perspective when all of a sudden everyone else is an expert telling you that you should have spent the money already? I mean, Nicole, is this an area where you feel a pressure to invest, or are you taking it step at a time?
I mean, we are lucky because we have a big proportion of the fleet that is on bicycles, so push bikes. But that being said, there's only so many types of orders that you can do on a push bike alone. So of course we do feel the pressure to, diversify our fleet and have different types of transport models that accommodate that. Now, based on what Hendrik said earlier, which is, the power of data and segmenting, this is where, we would love to have partners who can help retailers to do that segmentation at checkout, where, yes, if you're in Edinburgh, you can qualify for 100% green delivery. And if we surface that, then it becomes good enough because you don't need to have a nationwide service that is equal because you cannot segment. So I think that is where it's super important to have, partners, strong partners that can help us do that, because that's not our focus, that's not our forte.
Yeah.
Um,
So
Yeah,
the integration is important there. Hendrik,
Yeah.
please.
Yeah, maybe to add on this to your questions, and actually we've got an example which we're working on with Stuart, so I think it's nice to share. So I think every step is appreciated, and I don't think if you take every small step, you'll never get to a point where everything is like perfect. So I think that's the first point I think need to acknowledge, that it starts with small steps. So Asendia often, as retailers where there's cross-continental movement, actually that's basically mainly our expertise. And what we see more is that there is a desire to deliver green. And if you look at companies like Stuart, they're still, and please, Nicole, jump in if I'm not saying it correctly, but I think the strength of your networks are mainly intercities, where there's a high drop density and that you actually can reach a lot of addresses with a bike. So what we are actually trying to do now is make a proposal where we say to a large retailer, for the main cities, for example, in London, Paris, where you've got many shoppers, there we basically deliver into a hub of Stuart, whereby the final mile delivery is done by Stuart. And in the other parts of the country, where there isn't that yet, in the smaller city or in countryside, we actually use the standard carriers, I would say. And in that way, you kind of make little steps of going green, but obviously dealing with the limitation that you don't have those networks nationwide necessarily.
Interesting. And again, I can remember years ago, 20 years ago, when we were first working with people like Metapack, and of course other carrier management companies are available, but we'd work with them, and it was very much a hub for logic decision making, bringing all the data together. And this is now needed at every stage of retail activity. And I think this comes to our point on data, and I think where things get interesting is no longer are we just talking about a generalized data, but the data we use is becoming more structured, more open, and more interoperating. And this is a slide I've taken from GS1, who of course are famous for inventing and managing the barcodes that we all see. But behind the physical barcode, of course, is the number space, the namespace that they've created. So the GTINs, the global trade item numbers, ASINs as Amazon calls them, we already know well. It's like the ISBN in the book market. But we're also seeing now equivalent standards for location, for asset identification, even for document types that can offer certainty that, for example, a customs clearance document is a real one, and then serial shipping for managing multiple containers. We have seen the start of unique IDs, mainly in the pharma industry, to make sure that, Hendrik, if you're having a COVID injection, that you're absolutely certain that it's a real one and that that's the exact dose that you've had. But I think this will soon start coming into broader retail, maybe not down to an individual, pot of jam or a pack of biscuits, but I think we'll see a merging of the food quality assurance. How do I know that this is the right, that there's the actual ingredients are correct in this? We'll see that extending. So there'll be more and more data. And one of the main areas we'll be seeing this is in transparency around food labeling. So we're already familiar with the traffic light system, as you can see in the bottom middle of this, around fat, salt, carbohydrate, protein, and is it good for us? But we're starting to see now eco scores. So the consumer will be able to look at a packet of food product and get an understanding of the environmental impact of their food, and not just the food itself, but the getting of that food into their hands. And this is being backed at the moment by the UK government, Nestle, Marks and Spencer's, Co-op, Sainsbury's. So again, people who are used to very high levels of data management and quality assurance, and I think a good attempt to bring sustainability into the customer's eyeball, even though it's a phenomenally challenging area. So Hendrik, is this something that you have been involved with when you're looking at the cross-border international deliveries where people are asking you for more data about the carbon cost, the environmental costs? How have you seen this in practice?
Well, we do have very large retailers which exactly ask that question. And I wish to say that it's incredibly easy to track and to give them a number, which makes perfectly sense. So I think one is, how do you exactly calculate it? And I think the initiatives you now mention in food, I think will help to make it more transparent also, I would say, in the cross-border e-commerce space, especially from continent to continent, to exactly calculate the CO2 emissions. So I think, although there may be simplified ways to measure it or to come close to it, or at least show a trend, what you're doing to offset it, I think it's very difficult to exactly put a number to it. And I think every initiative to make that better or to improve it will push us towards a more emission-free delivery, I would say.
Yeah, good. Okay, let's carry on then and have a look at new partnerships. So two new things I want to pick up on. One is the department store world has been shaken up a lot, and as some of the groups disappear, some others are now starting to become more brand-like. So I just want to pick up on Marks and Spencer, the globally famous UK-based department store that previously hadn't had that many brands, but is now starting to stock brands. And at the same time, I wanted to go back to a partnership approach, which is the Co-op, which seems to have a hobby of working with many, many different carrier models. So Liz, maybe just give us your response to M&S now stocking multiple brands, and maybe the logistic challenges this is going to offer both M&S and the brands themselves.
Yeah, I mean the M&S thing is really interesting. The fact that they're opening up there. M&S is very strong on its brand promise and so on, and so it'll be wanting to keep that within the delivery experience as well, for the brands that it's partnering with. So it'll be interesting how that plays out.
And when you look at some of these brands, you take a Clark's, or Clark's is a good example, or Triumph, White Stuff. They have their own stores, so they'll have stock in the DC, stock in transit, stock in the stores. They sell on marketplaces. So they may have committed stock to an Amazon warehouse or a third-party marketplace specialist. Now they need to be part of M&S's store offering and their online pick, pack, dispatch. If I'm a White Stuff hoodie, I'm being pulled in dozens of places. I need to be everywhere at once. How, Hendrik, can brands approach knowing where their stock should be and who should get the hoodie in size medium in red? Should it be in my store, my Brussels store, my UK store? Where should the stock go?
Well, if that was an easy to answer question, then I think you make a lot of retailers happy, right?
I like the fact that everybody else smiles. I think, thank God Hendrik's going to answer that question.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think so. Asendia, this is an expertise on itself. So one is collecting the data, and then second is to make it usable for making the right decisions, like where do you need to put your stock. So Asendia took an investment in a company which is actually specialized on this, which is called Enchanto, which basically one connects the inventory with the different channels, social commerce, e-commerce, commerce via platforms. And then secondly, based on, because that even adds more complexity, not to who you sell it, but also through which channel you sell it. And then secondly, basically using that data to predict, and it still is a prediction, to understand where you need to move your stock. I think probably a relatively easier way to start somewhere, right, is to have to identify fast movers versus slow movers, so people know normally what sells quick, and it kind of makes sense to put your fast movers closer to the consumer because you know you will sell them.
Yeah.
But that's only a tip of the iceberg. But again, you need to start somewhere.
Good. I think getting the data is important. Now, moving on, we're seeing a change in returns. So in the old days, a return was, I don't want it, have it back. Whereas now the customers are selling to each other. They want to make sure that the products are being looked after. And so this is, I think, just a change we're seeing now, that returns are not the negative end of the story, but rather an important part of ongoing selling. So it's interesting to see how eBay is offering a guarantee of authenticity. So if you buy yourself, I don't know, item of jewelry or watch for over $2,000 or euros, they will now check it out. So instead of selling it direct to the consumer, the customer, customer to customer, you send it to eBay. They give a certificate saying it's absolutely not fake. Then you get it. We're also seeing that returns aren't just a case of give it back, but let me sell it for you. So IKEA will now take its own furniture back after you've had it for up to 7 years, check it's okay, and then sell it on its second chance at life program. And we're also seeing marketplaces that previously were just, we're a platform where people can sell to other people, bringing in assurance. So we have Goat with their authentic trainers using AI to scan the product and give us scores to whether they think they need to pull it back in. Vinted for secondhands, and Reverb, which is a specialist marketplace for professional sound production, bought by Etsy a while ago, that of course we know also bought Depop. So again, specialism there in that whole after first purchase marketplace. Nicole, are you having to make any adjustments to your service for either high value or for collection from customer, or is this something that hasn't yet impacted you?
So that's not a segment we primarily focus on right now. There is a B2C function that we have that enables you to, use our services as a peer-to-peer kind of functionality. That is not something that our team in particular focuses on expanding. We'd rather go down the B2B route, which is enabling retailers to offer faster return collections, whereby we would go to an end customer's home and then drop ship either back into, a Pudo network or to a store directly. That is our realm of focus. But that being said, I think there's a lot happening in that space, and I don't think there's ever been enough focus on returns, because there's so much focus on outbound. to be worked on, but it's becoming hotter and hotter as a topic I see between retailers.
And of course, Hendrik, this just adds to the complexity that you no longer have just a simple DC, a simple warehouse, a simple pick and pack. You may now have to take the returns to a recycling place, to a store, or to, I don't know, I'm imagining a high security, quality assurance place where people are valuing €50,000 pairs of sneakers and second-hand Rolexes. So again, the reverse logistics is becoming as complex as the outbound.
Yeah, I would even say that the reverse logistics makes it a lot more complicated. I think there's enormous pressure on and focus on returns. One, because it hits retailers' bottom line very quickly. And if you look at obviously the fashion retailers, they've got 30 to 50% return rates. So you can almost question how that is sustainable, purely from a business perspective, not even mentioning an environmental perspective. So I think there will be an enormous focus on reducing the returns in the first place. That basically means fitting guides. If you buy sunglasses, you can already check it out how it looks like in kind of an avatar mode. So I think that's one. And secondly, what we try to do indeed is because we move mainly cross-continental. Can you imagine in the current climate where there's still a surge in air freight capacity? We actually need to return it not only locally back in country, we need to fly it back to the other side of the world to maybe put it back into a warehouse. And I think I know we are now having initiatives with retailers to actually keep them local and even try to sell them local again, like one of your initiatives, because we do have the data often. So we are able, when we receive and deliver goods, we are able to actually, by scanning them, getting the goods description and the photos scraped as you like, and we could sell them then on a local platform. And these are initiatives which are in an infant stage, but it doesn't make sense to fly them all the way back.
No, of course not.
And I think what we're trying to do is, again, with little steps, improving that for retailers.
And one of the challenges you often get is that the web can be now the flagship store, and so you've bought something that isn't stocked or available in your local high street or the city you live in. And for global brands, this is one of the challenges. So I want to just finish off with another new challenge for us in the digital flagships we're seeing. So we've covered off the use of the store as a distribution centre for pick, pack, collect, for ordering. These are all normal, but we are seeing a renewed push of investment to create digital flagships. So here's the Burberry flagship in Ginza in Japan, and they have created a 3-story digital version of the actual store. Now, you can have a look. It's on burberryginza.com, and those of you with sharp eyes will recognise the URL is exactly the same as the one used by estate agents for the digital walk around and digital floor plans. So if you look along the bottom, you can see that this is just like stalking a house you can't afford with all the various rooms. The difference being, of course, that when you're in a room, you have little hover over buttons that allow you to buy the product. So obviously I can think of all of the challenges here: maintaining stock, keeping it up to date. Is it really adding? Is it just marketing, etc., etc.? But just a thought. Let's maybe start with you, Nicole. Is this the answer to your dreams? The way to get your hands on top-end swag from global flagships, or do you think this is a marketing endeavor that isn't going to catch on? So is this a win for the future or just a one-off?
I mean, it's I think looking at where this is taking place is where you have the average number of parcels per capita per annum really, really high. So, I think Europe's still lagging behind on that, but it gives us a sense of what the future might look like in Europe. I think that we have seen with the pandemic hybridization of stores, where there is a movement on that front on how to best utilize or reutilize existing assets that are present today. So this could be a movement in that direction. And of course, once we move to that world, then it makes the notion of collecting and shipping and dispatching from store a lot more standard, potentially, because it's set up in a way that it requires potentially less footfall because more is happening online, which would make sense.
Great. Well, the comments we've had in have all been around data systems integration, so that one system and partner knows what the other is doing. So that's obviously the underlying issue for all the professionals. So thank you for all those comments. Look, we've run on longer than I thought, so maybe let's just wrap it up with, in a sentence, either what have I missed, or what should we look at for the next update? What's bubbling that you think should have been included? So Liz, just in a sentence, have we missed anything today, or is there something we should have on the agenda for our autumn review?
I don't think we've missed anything, but I think this idea of the customer want and the customer need is just going to be so interesting. That's driving everything, and that has to drive retailers' decisions as well. Yes, I might want delivery in 5 minutes. Do I need it? No. It's just getting that balance right. I think that's going to be really interesting.
Good, and you've also given me an opportunity to make a quick plug, which is over the summer we are conducting 10,000 consumer surveys across Europe, and just looking at their reality and how they prioritise sustainability and service within their online purchases. So if anybody's interested in playing or wants to add questions or would like to collaborate, Ian@retailx.net, get back to me as soon as you can. Hendrik, anything I've missed, or a top tip for our autumn review?
Yeah, I think what's really interesting for me, how social commerce will develop in European and in the US, because if you look at Asia and China, it's so much bigger than I would say in the Western world, and those consumers, they buy because of that. So I'm curious to see if that trend will actually also be taken over, let's say in Europe or US, or that this kind of stays something big, maybe for Asia.
Okay, well look, I happen to know that on Friday we're chatting with Ji Long from DR2 in China, and he's going to give us a sneak peek of behind the scenes how live streaming works in the Chinese market, and very much looking forward to that. So that's a Friday afternoon. Plenty of time to sign up to it now if you haven't already. Thank you, Hendrik. Nicole, one thing we've missed, or one thing to have on our radar for next time?
I think fully agree with Liz on, what do end customers really want? At the end of the day, we're here because of end customers' demand. So I think that would be a great insight. And then I think looking into what are the most developed markets doing, how are they evolving, and where are they today, because that should give us insights on trends that we should be expecting to see over here.
Okay, well look, thank you for that. I'm glad we covered off so much. Thank you for your input. It's been a fascinating discussion. So Liz, thanks for joining us. Nicole, Hendrik, thank you both. Lovely to see you in the studio. And that wraps up our session for now. As I said, this is just one of the 15 during this week. So do head over to E-commerce World Review to sign up for anything you've missed. Look it over. And of course, thank you for your questions today. If there are any we've left unanswered, drop us a note to research@retailx.net, and we'd be very, very happy to hear from you. But for now, and from everyone in the studio, it's thank you for spending some time with us, and we wish you all very happy trading.